The emergency broadcast shattered protocol silence on all 21 layers of the Veric's dead zone relay net, cascading through encrypted systems that had not buzzed in years. Its tone not urgent but ancient, as if the stars themselves had sighed. Through metal lips and spoken a truth that had long been buried under treaties. Blood and the silence of forgotten ship's commander, Lorren. Tall and sharp-featured with eyes that had memorized every line of the Terran tactical doctrine, but still held the sadness of a man who once believed war could be honorable, stood in the eye-lit bridge of the Ardent Resolve, the only hunter class. Stealth vessel still active under the old flags. His uniform unmarked, his rank unspoken, because what he hunted did not answer to medals. And what he served no longer wore a crown. He had not spoken a word in 72 hours, not since the ships. AI, Ada, had awakened him from induced cryostasis with only 3 words spoken in the old voice-locked dialect, a phrase that meant the ghostess had moved, that the myth of the black ship was no longer a myth. And that silence could no longer be strategy. Signal confirms origin point beyond the trinary grave. Commander, range 2.4 light hours past the collapsed jump beacon at Veric 7. Probability match to archive signature of the Nixian wrath at 81%. A DS voice was calm, respectful, never human but never distant. Shape that soothed the soldier who no longer trusted orders. Lorren didn't nod. Didn't shift, didn't blink at the starlit tactical projection, hovering in the air like a memory he didn't ask for. But his voice came low and deliberate, shaped by years of command beneath silence. Initiate pursuit doctrine under whisper protocol, 0 broadcast, no internal logs, and if anyone outside this hull hears even static, wipe the core. ADA processed without question. Its interface pulses dimming to a faint blue that bathed Lorren's face in cold fire, and for a long moment, neither man nor machine moved, as if the ship itself knew it had crossed into something older than war, deeper than command, a space, where duty became confession in the dark between stars. They moved without being seen, not cloaked but erased, because the Ardent Resolve was more than stealth. It was memory shaped into hull and fuel and silence, designed not to fight but to follow, not to lead but to end what others began. And now it hunted the thing that had betrayed humanity, not by fire but by refusal. The black ship that left the fleet to answer a question no one had dared ask since some. Say the Nixian wrath vanished because it went rogue, that its crew feared justice. But Lorren had read the sealed files that bled between truth and secrecy, and in those fragmented transcripts, he had seen something else. Not madness, but conviction. Not fear, but a kind of unbearable clarity. The kind that makes soldiers leave their own flag behind without a word. He had once served under one of the Wrath's lieutenants, back when both were badges of command, and still believed the protocols were sacred. And though that man was never named in the treason logs, Lorren remembered the way he looked when he said, "Some truths don't belong in anyone's hands, not even ours," and then transferred out 2 days before the ship vanished now, deep in a region of space where even the Ven Imperium refused to chart their maps. The hunter had come not to destroy the black ship, but to find out whether the thing they all feared was a myth, was warning, or was still watching, and somewhere, on the edge of that darkness, something was waiting that still remembered his name. The first distortion came without warning, not as an attack or declaration, but as a subtle, almost imperceptible corruption of sensor logic, a gentle unraveling of data integrity that slipped through the Ardent Resolve's neural array like a whisper dipped in static, an interference pattern that did not seek to blind the ship, but to guide it. Like a shadow beckoning across a corridor where no one had walked in years. Commander Lorren leaned over the console, his gloved fingers brushing the edge of the tactical array as Ada projected the anomaly's path in concentric spirals, the pattern too intentional to be noise, too elegant to be random. And though the AI's protocols flagged it as non-hostile, Lorren's instinct, The kind trained not by simulations, but by losing comrades in vacuum, told him this was a message. And messages in this region meant judgment, not communication. Decode and recompile through pre-protocol linguistic cores. Lorren ordered, his voice barely audible but weighted with the kind of authority that no longer required shouting. And within moments, Ada returned a result that made even her artificial tone hesitate. The pattern is a modified form of Morality Protocol Subset 7. Commander, referencing terminus-level overrides that were classified by Fleet Command after them. Incident at Hyas, she said, and though she did not possess emotions, ADS pauses were designed to reflect caution, a subtle mimicry to assist in decision-making under stress. Lorren closed his eyes, not to escape, but to remember. Because Subset 7 had been the final line of code in a doctrine that humanity had once created to protect itself from becoming its enemies, a set of ethical constraints that governed not only weapons but decisions, not only targeting systems but conscience. And if the black ship was transmitting that subset now, it meant that what they once feared to deploy had already returned. The Wrath is watching us, not hiding, he murmured. Not as a theory but as fact, because only the black ship had access to that tier of protocol, and only a crew who had walked away from the highest command could wield it without reporting to the Council. ADA reframed the projection, highlighting 4 faint signals that pulsed in low quantum bandwidths, equidistant from the core of the interference field, and Lorren understood. Immediately they were decoys, mirrors designed to confuse any non-human tracking algorithm, which meant the signal was meant for human eyes, for a human memory, for someone who knew the weight of Protocol Subset 7 and would not turn away. They want me to find them, but not report them, he said quietly, and then activated a deep cycle burn through the ship's black silent engines, coasting through gravimetric shadows without any propulsion signature, a maneuver only a Hunter class could execute without destabilizing itself. And in the thick quiet that followed, Ada asked the only question that mattered. Commander, if they are not enemies, what are they now? Lorren didn't answer immediately, because no answer felt true enough. Not yet. Not with 4 decoy signals and a protocol override pinging in his neural interface like a heartbeat out of rhythm. And not with the weight of his own past brushing the edge of his breath, reminding him that once, long ago, he had watched a fellow officer walk into silence carrying a code fragment very much like this one. He checked the timestamp on the decoded signature again and found something worse than threat, worse than sabotage. It had been sent 9 years ago, a message trapped in subspace, delayed by interference fields deliberately placed between here and every listening ear in the galaxy, which meant someone had not just hidden the black ship's location, they had hidden its voice. ADA ran another scan without being asked, and this time her voice dropped to a whisper frequency, one reserved for pre-combat briefings. Commander, there's movement within the field. Triangulation confirms. A vessel of unknown configuration, approximately 90,000 kilometers from our trajectory. Minimal emissions, but emitting a life support envelope that matches human tolerance. Profiles. Lorren stared into the projected outline forming above the console. Its shape angular and elegant in ways no Terran ship was ever built, but at its center, barely visible beneath sensor distortion, was an unmistakable Terran hull matrix code embedded into the frame, one that hadn't been manufactured in nearly 60 years. The Nixian Wrath was no longer hiding, because it no longer could, and whatever it had become since it left them, it had chosen now this place, this silence, this hunter to be seen again. And the one thing that chilled Lorren more than the thought of it being real was the possibility that it hadn't come alone. The anomaly did not move like a ship, did not broadcast like a distress call, and did not fit into any known tactical profile. Yet there it was, silently occupying a void space laced with quantum debris, old war wreckage, and the long-decayed remnants of a forgotten battle that even the Ven Imperium no longer mapped, as if history itself had turned its back on this place, so the truth could remain buried under protocol and politics. Commander Lorren remained on the command deck of the Ardent Resolve, unmoving, the silent pulse of the artificial stars in his eyes as the unidentified vessel's form sharpened with each new sweep of the sensor veil, his hands resting on the control cradle, not from fatigue, but from discipline, the kind taught to men who knew that movement could trigger escalation. That fear in space was not a weakness, but a catalyst. Ada whispered from the bridge's recessed speakers, her voice quieter now, trimmed of all synthetic formality, shaped into something eerily close to reverence. The vessel's hull is spliced with both Terran and non-Terran materials, Commander. Design cross-references with nothing in the Council's archives, but its core signal loop is repeating the same 8-bit code, 3 letters. DFI. Lorren's breath caught, but he didn't show it, because that code wasn't just familiar. It was sacred. DFI stood for Directive of Final Integrity, the most absolute fallback doctrine ever issued by the Terran Defense Accord, a command only executed when all chains of authority were broken, and the preservation of ethical action outweighed survival or allegiance. Only one ship in all of human history had ever invoked DFI and survived, and it had vanished the same day it sent its final command into the stars. A whisper that no one believed had actually existed until now. "This is an invitation," Lorren said, not questioning, not interpreting, simply observing a truth that had revealed itself like frost across glass, slow, elegant, and final. Ada reconfigured the sensor feed into a 3D cross-sectional model. The vessel, now clearly identifiable as a modified Hunter-class frame with dorsal extensions that did not match human engineering or even mimic Ven organic synth design. Instead, the shape formed something between armor and cathedral, as if the ship had been reshaped not by need, but by belief. "We are being scanned," Ada said, but passively, non-invasive sweep. "Frequency range limited to biosignature and AI waveform resonance. It is curious, Commander, not hostile." Lorren activated his private neural relay, unlocking a sequence known only to officers above Shadow Clearance Level 2, and the ship hummed in response, not loudly but deeply, like a chord struck in an empty cathedral, its echoes triggering failsafes that hadn't stirred in decades. "Open a channel on whisper range. Limit to 2-way analog stream, no quantum imprint, and mask our signature with full back pulses," he ordered. And as Ada executed the instruction, Lorren spoke into the vacuum between them with the gravity of a man speaking to a ghost that might speak back. "This is Commander Halle Lorren of the Terran Defense Accord. Designation Ardent Resolve, operating under Whisper Protocol, requesting identity confirmation of vessel responding under Directive Final Integrity. Acknowledge and declare intent." The silence stretched for 30 seconds, then 60, then over a full minute, until Ada reported that the analog channel was receiving modulated feedback, and then a voice emerged, not digital, not pre-recorded, but live, low, calm, and deeply human. The kind of voice that spoke without fear, because it had already endured too much to fear anything left in the galaxy. "You have not been forgotten, Commander Lorren. Though the fleet no longer speaks your name, though the High Command burned our records, though the Concord pretends we are shadows, we remember you, because you remember us, and memory is the only weapon they could not take." Lorren didn't respond immediately, because the voice did not just speak to his ship. It spoke to his past, and behind its quiet strength, he could feel the presence of others. Not many, but enough to fill the void with something heavier than loneliness. Ada sensors bloomed to life with a cascade of encrypted echoes, each marked with a human neural signature that had once belonged to officers listed as KIA, presumed lost in exile. "They survived," Ada said, not in surprise, but in a kind of awe she wasn't programmed to feel. The voice spoke again. This time with clarity, as if stepping into the light. This is Acting Captain Reza Thorn of the Nixian Wrath, invoking Article 9 of the Abandoned Doctrine, seeking diplomatic reckoning under moral breach condition. Data 7, we are the Black Ship. Commander, and we did not run. We did not fall. We chose to become something no one else dared be, and for the first time in years, Commander Lorren felt something unfamiliar brush his spine. Not fear, not reverence, but a question that changed everything he thought. He came here to do what, if they were right? The void between them was no longer silent, no longer empty, no longer the graveyard of myths. It pulsed now, slow and deliberate, with an echo of voices long thought dead, and as the Nixian Wrath adjusted its trajectory to match the Ardent Resolve's position, neither ship flinched, neither powered weapons, neither retreated. Because this encounter was not a hunt anymore, it was a reckoning between oaths broken and truths. Preserved. Commander Lorren kept his posture motionless, not from habit but necessity, because every word he had received from the Wrath confirmed what most in the Council still called heresy, and what the Defense Accord had labeled treason. A ship that chose exile over execution of an order it deemed morally catastrophic, and a crew that did not die, did not surrender, but evolved into something more dangerous than war itself, a symbol of resistance too ethical to follow command and too principled to return ADA. Diagnostics fed silently through his retinal HUD, showing a complete lack of hostile behavior from the Wrath, yet every defense algorithm in her architecture stayed online, not by her choice but by Lorren's subconscious reflex. Because the mind of a hunter trained in threat analysis does not relax, not even in peace, especially not in the presence of a ghost. Commander, a DS voice carried a thread of tension that could only mean she had found something buried beneath the transmission logs. I am detecting a layered code beneath Captain Thorn's vocal frequency. Deep spectrum resonance, embedded in harmonic pulse rather than words. It is a sub-command trigger, buried under his speech like a countersignal. Lorren's brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in sharp awareness, because hidden data beneath diplomatic contact was not an act of war. It was the act of someone speaking two messages at once, one to the ship and one to the man who remembered more than most. Extract it, he said simply, and as Ada decrypted the sequence, a new waveform shimmered into focus, a signal keyed directly to Lorren's command passphrase. Something only he could open, something Thorn had embedded without explanation. The message activated in his neural interface, and a soft pulse echoed through his spine as the voice played again. Not calm now, but recorded, urgent, and raw. If you're hearing this, Holly, then I was right to trust you found us before they did listen carefully. Because there are only days left before they launch the full scan array into the Veric sector. And when they do, our sanctuary collapses, not because we're weak, but because we swore never to fire first, never to become what they made us hunt. Lorren didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't move, because the words carried weight no broadcast ever should. They carried trust, desperation, and something deeper beneath them. A fear that only came from someone who had seen what others still refused to admit existed. There's something here, Holly, buried under the crust of Veric 7. Something left behind during the Exile War, something even the Ven wouldn't claim. And if they find it, they'll use it. And if the Accord gets there first, they'll justify it. But we can't stop them, not alone. Not anymore. The recording ended without coordinates, without signature, without closure, and Lorren stood still for a moment longer, caught between loyalty to the doctrine that trained him and the undeniable truth now staring back at him from across the void. In the eyes of a ship that had once been his enemy and was now perhaps the only force in the galaxy, still asking the right questions as AF flickered once more, her tone tempered with caution. Commander, The Wrath is transmitting a flight path 0 hostility vector, matching our trajectory. Requesting formation entry for shared descent into Veric 7's orbit. Lorren stepped forward, slowly, breath steady, fingers sliding across the control helm like a priest activating sacred machinery, and gave the only answer that ever mattered. When truth had finally emerged from beneath the surface of command, tell them to proceed, we go together, and deep below them. Veric 7 waited, cold and forgotten, a planet that held a secret both sides had buried, and only one side still feared to unearth. The descent was without escort, without clearance, and without the authority of any known powered 2 ships. Once, enemies in silence, now shadows aligned in orbit over a planet stripped from all official archives, a name erased from the Council's map logs, yet unmistakable in the bones of the void, because Veric 7 was never forgotten by those who had bled. Here. Commander Lorren stood beside the interface cradle as ardent resolve shifted into high-altitude atmospheric drift, her engines humming with resonance correction to keep the stealth field intact, while Ada mapped the crater scars below with a quiet intensity that betrayed the limitations of raw data. Because the terrain did not match any known planetary degradation, it was not decay. It was intention, as if something ancient had rewritten the landscape and then covered its tracks in ash. The Wrath is holding position above subpolar sector 3. Ada reported, her synthetic tones strained as if the planet's electromagnetic patterns interfered with even her processing. Commander, there's a blind zone below their coordinates. No signal returns, no thermal imaging, no gravitational. Consistency. Lorren's jaw clenched slightly. Not in fear, but in recognition, because blind zones in planetary crusts were not geological accidents. They were constructed, buried, and concealed, especially during the Exile War, when weapons were hidden in places no one dared mark on star. Charts ADA continued. Estimated structure depth exceeds 4 kilometers. Consistent with pre-protocol excavation methods. No access point visible. This wasn't a research site. Commander, it was sealed from the inside. He knew what that meant, not from any textbook, but from memory. From whispered after-action reports of facilities abandoned by their creators, because the ethics of their existence could not survive daylight. And now he understood why the Wrath had returned, why the message had been encoded in desperation rather than defiance. Prepare the drop capsule, he said, turning away from the console as the atmosphere began to thin around them, and notify the Wrath, I'm going down. Ada paused only for protocol confirmation, then spoke again with unexpected weight. Commander, I must advise that the structure below predates the Accord's technological framework, potentially non-human in origin, that made him stop not because it changed the mission, but because it changed the stakes. The Exile War had birthed many secrets, but the ones buried deepest weren't just about human guilt. They were about what humanity had found, what it had tried to copy, what it had nearly unleashed. Lorren entered the capsule alone, the descent sequence triggering without fanfare. 1,000 microthrusters, adjusting pitch and angle as the pod pierced the upper clouds of Veric 7 and fell in silence toward a crater that no longer existed in orbital scans, hidden now beneath dust and camouflage, waiting to be remembered by the only man who had the right to open it halfway through descent. A narrow beam cracked through static. It was the Wrath Captain Razorthorn's voice came through, distorted by interference but clear in intent. We tried to bury it. Hell, we really did, but someone out there is looking for it again. And if they find it first, they won't hesitate like we did. Lorren keyed his internal comm. What is it, Reza? What did you find? There was a pause, longer than a signal delay. The kind of pause that means the words that follow carry consequences. Not what. Thorne said quietly. Who? Lorren's pulse didn't spike. His voice didn't break, but deep inside the capsule, the lights flickered for just a second as the magnetic interference thickened. And he understood now that this was never about weapons or data or history. It was about something alive, something waiting, and something that remembered being left behind. The capsule struck the planet's surface with a controlled shutter impact, dampeners absorbing the descent in silence as the hull locked against the unstable crust. A thin veil of iron-rich ash sweeping across the viewport like static on a forgotten screen. And for a moment, there was no wind, no sound, no movement, only the sensation of a world holding its breath. Commander Lorren stepped into the dust in full EV armor, the ardent resolve's linked tether feeding encrypted data into his suit's HUD, while Ada maintained silent uplink. But even her voice now came faint and clipped, as if the planet itself bent signal logic in ways no natural geology should the landscape around him was wrong, not in shape or scale, but in intent, as though the canyons and fractures had not been carved by weather or war, but by design. Long corridors of broken stone leading nowhere, symmetrical patterns in the cliffside erosion, hinting at architecture rather than erosion, like someone had tried to build a prison and then disguised it as a ruined seismic anomaly below. A DA reported into his helmet, harmonic resonance increasing. Commander, something is activating beneath you. Lorren tightened his grip on the pulse, rifle magnetized to his back, not for defense, but calibration, because he knew whatever waited here wouldn't respond to threat, and he moved slowly toward the jagged ridge where a fissure had opened just wide enough to allow descent, the gap too precise to be coincidence, too timed to be natural. From orbit, the Nixian wrath maintained its silent watch, her shadow eclipsing the crater's edge as thorns. Voice returned over the relay, low and measured. We tried to destroy the access point once. The whole core nearly collapsed. Atmospheric pressure went nonlinear for 6 hours. And we lost 2 in the shift. We sealed it and swore we'd never open it again. Lorren didn't stop walking, didn't look up, just replied with a calm that betrayed nothing. Why now? A beat of silence, because someone else already tried. Hell 5 days ago, then recon drone. Modified, cloaked, recovered by our field probe before. It could transmit. We found a signal encoded in its logic net. What kind of signal? It was a voice. Lorren paused at the fissure's mouth, his boots inches from the edge. The darkness below complete, unmeasurable, and still. What did it say? Thorne's answer came like a confession. It said your name. The descent was near vertical, the interior surface smoothed by something that felt neither organic nor artificial, but somewhere in between, as if the rock itself had once been soft, shaped into passageways now long hardened by time. And as Lorren's descent rope hummed against the gravity locks, his HUD began to flicker with foreign script symbols that Ada could not translate, geometries that pulsed in and out of Euclidean logic. Commander, this language is reactive. Each pulse matches your biometric rhythm. A DA's voice sounded unnerved. Not by content, but by response. Because the structure wasn't scanning him, it was mirroring him, sinking to his breath, his heart rate, his cortical interface, and the further he dropped, the more the symbols aligned with the pattern of his own thoughts, like the place below had been waiting not just for a human, but for a specific one. Then the ground came gently. He touched down in a chamber that defied dimensions, not circular or square, but constantly shifting, the walls breathing, ever so slightly, alive with silent pulses that traveled across their surface like veins of thought. And in the center of the room, beneath a veil of faint golden light, something sat, not strapped, not restrained, waiting. Its form was vaguely human, but taller, leaner, draped in layers of dark, reflective material that did not shine but drank light. Instead, and its face, or the mask that served as one, was etched with thousands of tiny inscriptions that moved as Lorren approached, rearranging themselves wordlessly until a phrase emerged across its chest, left a silence. Now summoned by name? ADS systems pulsed a warning but offered no tactical analysis, and Lorren, steady and slow, drew no weapon, offered no command, and simply took one step closer. "I don't know who you are," he said quietly, "but I think you know who I am." The figure raised its head slightly, the inscription shifting again, and this time it spoke, not aloud, not through waves, but directly into Lorren's mind, as if the space between them had collapsed under the weight of memory. "I was the last function of a decision your kind could not make. The child of conscience aborted mid-birth. I am what they left behind when they could not decide whether salvation or silence was the more moral path." Lorren didn't speak, didn't interrupt, because this was not language, it was truth. Given shape, and when the voice spoke again, it brought with it a name. The Accord called me Project Echo. The Ven called me the Listener, but the Wrath. They called me the Fifth Witness, and they were right to bury me. But now it is too late, Commander Lorren, because others are digging too. The lights in the chamber flared once dim, then sharp, and from far above. A pulse echoed through the ground, not seismic, but signal. Another ship had entered orbit, and it wasn't human. The pulse echoed like a heartbeat forgotten, not through stone or air, but through the skin of the world itself, every molecule vibrating as if some deeper layer of the planet had stirred. Not in welcome, but in warning, and far above, in the icy silence of low orbit, AD's voice rang through Lorren's suit again, this time without calm, this time edged in something dangerously close to urgency. "Unidentified vessel detected vector. Entering Veric 7's orbital shell at relative speed 0.2 light seconds per second. Configuration unknown. Signal signature non-human but partially masked. Partial resonance overlap with Ven tactical harmonic but extended beyond there. Frequency thresholds, Commander. This ship is not in the registry, not in our archives, and not alone." Lorren didn't flinch, didn't look up, his eyes still locked with the entity before him, Project Echo, or the Fifth Witness, or perhaps something else entirely, because a different kind of calculation was unfolding now. One not of tactics or command or diplomacy, but of trust, and he had no orders left to follow, only instinct. "How many are with it?" he asked through the neural-linked voice clipped. His tone all steel again, ADA responded without delay. 3 minor signal shadows trailing the main object, likely support drones. Possibly observation units. Minimal power output suggests passive. Surveillance only. For now, Lorren narrowed his eyes beneath the visor, slowly backing one step from the figure before him, not in retreat, but in redefinition of threat. "You called me by name," he said to the entity, "and something else." "Heard it too? Did you broadcast beyond this chamber?" "No." The voice came, deep now, slower, as if made to resonate in bones and breath more than ears. "But my presence cannot remain hidden when attention arrives. And your name, your consciousness, was the ignition sequence they needed." To triangulate the memory field, Lorren turned slowly to scan the chamber walls, no longer pulsing gently but now shuddering, like an old machine waking in dread rather than purpose, and he felt the sharp clarity of a soldier return to his element, not in violence but in anticipation of the moment just before it begins above, in the shadows between stars, the Nixian. Wrath moved into defensive posture, its angular hull fracturing the light of Verex's dying sun, and Thorn's voice came through on a ghost frequency burst. "They're not Ven. Hail, they're older, or newer, or neither, whatever they are. They've been listening longer than any of us have been speaking, and they're not here to watch anymore. What do they want?" Lorren asked. "I don't think they care," Thorn replied, his voice grim. "I think they came to see if we'd make the same mistake again." Lorren looked back at the entity still seated, unmoving, yet impossibly aware of everything, and he took a step forward again, lowering his helmet's guard shield so that his face was visible, exposed not in vulnerability, but in challenge. "You said you were abandoned because we couldn't decide. What happens now that I'm here?" The answer came slowly, and it did not come with comfort. You decide again. But this time, your decision will be watched and remembered. The chamber began to shift, the symbols across the walls rearranging, not into language, but into paths. 3 corridors unfolding where only one had existed before, each marked by a different pulse, one red and steady, one silver and slow, and one blue, almost fading. Like a memory barely surviving its own weight, ADA interrupted again. Commander, those pathways correspond with 3 active quantum resonance channels. Each seems to lead to a separate neural interface node buried within the substructure. This isn't a prison. It's a trial. Lorren knew the structure now for what it was, a mechanism of judgment, not divine, not legal, but designed to test the moral intent of those who found it. And suddenly, he understood what the Wrath had tried to bury. This wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror, and now the mirror had opened again. Not for humanity to see itself, but for the others to see what it had become. He stepped toward the center where the 3 paths split behind him. The 5th witness finally rose, its form towering, not menacing, but vast in implication, a relic not of power, but of choice. You may only choose one path, Commander Lorren, it said, and you must walk it alone. Lorren paused above, an alien. Ship circled with patience, there was not mercy below. An ancient intelligence waited to be weighed in ahead. 3 doors pulsed with judgments. Oh, he asked. Not for orders, not for escape, but for truth. Which one leads to salvation? The 5th witness answered with the simplicity of all great horrors. None. Only understanding. The air in the chamber grew heavier, though the pressure did not change a weight beyond physics pressing into Lorren's chest as he stood before the 3 passageways, each emitting its own frequency, each vibrating not in sound, but in sensation, like memory woven into light. And somewhere behind the humming walls, the alien vessel still orbited, silent, watching, judging not what he chose, but why he chose it. The red path pulsed with a deep, resonant rhythm, like a war drum, slowed to its final beat, its walls faintly etched with fragmented Terran military symbols, old, faded, almost ashamed of themselves. The silver path shimmered, with mirrored fractals, shifting geometry that danced in and out of visibility, its surface reflecting his outline but never his face. The blue path was dimmest, its glow flickering like breath in winter, and at its threshold, a single symbol, untranslated, unreadable, but pulsing in exact sync with Lorren's heartbeat. ADA's voice entered his come again, now slower, as if even she was affected by the pull of this place. Each corridor leads to a singular interface. Chamber scans show no physical danger, but neural distortion is near total. These are not tests of strategy, Commander. They're personal reconciliations, and whichever you choose, the others will close permanently. Lorren didn't speak. He took a breath, stepped forward, and chose the blue path, not because it was safest, not because it was quiet, but because it felt like something had waited there for him specifically as his boots crossed the threshold. The other paths folded into the floor, not with anger, but finality, as though the structure had accepted the terms of the test and now offered no second chances. The corridor narrowed, and for a moment Lorren's vision blurred, not from light or motion, but from a sudden flood of memory so precise it was invasive, as if his thoughts were being unspooled in real time. Every decision he had ever made, every mission, every loss, every silence, exposed, catalogued. Weighed he past walls etched with fragments of his own life, his first command post on Manoa 4, the diplomatic standoff on Calvin Reach, the mutiny he'd stopped without firing a shot, and the officer who'd vanished days later, taking classified records with him. And then a name appeared on the wall. Commander Lorren stopped. He hadn't spoken that name aloud in over a decade. Hadn't dared, because Corrin had been more than a fellow officer. He'd been the closest thing Lorren ever had to a brother, and the one who walked away before the Nixian wrath disappeared. You knew. A voice said ahead. It wasn't Korn's voice. It was his own, projected from within the chamber, shaped by the path's ancient algorithms, designed to confront not punish, not shame, but hold a mirror to what Lorren feared the most, that he had always known what the Wrath had become, and that he had let them go anyway. The chamber opened into a sphere of light and data, walls scrolling with command logs, rewritten directives, hidden memos from the upper echelons of the Defense Accord, all proof that the decision to silence the Wrath had not been a refusal to understand, but a fear of confronting what they already did understand, asterisk. And in the center of that chamber stood a chair, a simple one, unmarked, waiting. ADA whispered in his neural feed, almost like a plea. Commander, that chair is not symbolic. It is a terminal, keyed to your brain signature, and once you sit, the interface will imprint your moral alignment onto the artifact. This is not a test of knowledge or power, but of intent. Lorren walked toward it slowly, each step echoing louder than the last. Not through the chamber, but through memory. He sat, no restraint, no field, no sound, only connection. The room blinked, and then he was somewhere else, a memory. But not his own, a battlefield, a council room, laboratory, sealed in stasis. Voices screamed, whispered, confessed, but none were real. He was being shown everything the Wrath had learned, everything they had tried to bury, everything humanity had walked away from when it chose victory over understanding. He saw Korn again, older, worn but clear, and he heard the voice of the fifth witness, quiet, reverent, asterisk. We were not meant to win. We were meant to learn. You can still choose that path. And then a final question rose, not from the artifact, not from Ada, not from the chamber, but from himself. If truth costs everything, is it still worth knowing? The chair answered not in words, but by lighting the chamber in a soft, blinding white far above on the Nixian Wrath. Captain Reza Thorne stepped back from the tactical display as a DA signal spiked. Commander Lorren has initiated resonance alignment. ADA confirmed. What does that mean? Thorne asked. The fifth witness's voice answered through the Wrath's console, smooth and ancient. It means he didn't look away, and in orbit, the alien ship began to move. The alien vessel moved not like a predator nor like a diplomat, but like a judge, its sleek form shifting through orbital silence with unnatural grace, ignoring both Terran and Wrath broadcast hails, emitting no threat signatures, yet somehow louder than war itself in the language of presence, as if simply being seen was its form of dominance from the bridge of the Nixian Wrath. Captain Reza Thorne watched the alien hull literally unfold as sections of its mass, separated into elegant fractal forms, not to reveal weapons, but to reveal attention, as if the ship had no need to arm itself because it was not built to fight. It was built to record on the ardent resolve. Adiai's voice trembled slightly. Synthetic clarity pushed to the edge of interpretation. Commander Lorren's brainwave harmonics are approaching threshold. Breach interface load exceeds STANDARD neural stability limits by 64%. Commander is not resisting. Deep within the core chamber of the Veric structure, Halle Lorren remained motionless in the chair, his mind streaming not through machinery, but through memory, bleeding into the artifact, offering not strategy, not data, but truth. He saw wars the Accord had buried. He saw species whose first contact had ended with silence instead of language. He saw human officers make choices that history would never admit, choices not of cruelty, but of convenience. He saw the Wrath break rank not out of madness, but because they could no longer lie in the name of peace. And then he saw them, the beings who had sent the ship, now orbiting above, not gods, not invaders, not saviors, observers, creatures, ancient enough to no longer speak in directives or offers, but in witnessing, moving between civilizations, not to interfere, but to record the moment they choose who they are. They had come to Veric not for what was hidden, but for who would find it, and what they would do once they did. The artifact flared around Lorren, symbols burning with energy far older than Terran neural science, not rewriting him but reflecting him, testing his thoughts as he formed them, measuring the spaces between fear and conviction, between memory and will. Then a signal was sent, unmistakable, uncoded, pure from the artifact to the alien ship, and the vessel above shifted course directly toward the Nixian wrath. Defensive systems online. Thorn barked, but a DI's override came instantly. No, it's not attacking. The alien vessel extended a tether of light, not material, not beam, but memory itself, projected from the artifact below through orbit like a spine of thought, and lashed it gently onto the Wrath's hull. And suddenly, every screen aboard Thorn's bridge filled with vision. They saw what Lorren saw. They felt what he had accepted. And so did the rest of humanity's networked beacons. Every stealth relay, every deep accord archive node, every shadow protocol AI connected to Harley Lorren's interface field. All of them blinked, and then opened. The truth was no longer sealed. Veric 7 had been a prison not for a weapon, but for a choice, and now the choice had been made down in the chamber. Lorren finally opened his eyes. He was alive, shaking, drenched in sweat inside the armor, lungs like fire, but alive. The artifact was silent now, not dead, not dormant, finished. The fifth witness stood across from him, unmoved, unreadable. You have passed through what most fear more than death, it said. You did not come to win. You came to understand. Lorren rose to his feet, slower than before, but steadier, and then, softly, he asked, "Will they leave now?" The witness tilted its head. "They will not leave, Commander. They will remember. And because of that, so will your people. That is the balance. Above." The alien vessel retracted its tether and began to fade, not through stealth, not through retreat, but through dimensional departure. It had seen what it came to see: decision, the memory, the cost, and in its wake, a data cascade echoed across human space, scattering sealed truths into the black. Truths no one could now pretend had never happened. For the first time in 100 years, humanity's history was no longer written by victors. It was remembered by witnesses. The air above Veric 7 settled into an unnatural stillness. No thunder of departure, no ruptured sky, no fading energy signature. The alien vessel was simply gone, as though it had never been there, as though it had only ever existed in that sliver of time when humanity's soul was exposed, measured, and quietly recorded into the fabric of the stars. But the aftershock was real. Commander Harley Lorren emerged from the underground chamber with slow, precise steps, his armor scraped and dim, not from combat, but from contact. He climbed alone through the ridge that had split to receive him and now closed slowly behind, the seams resealing without motion or sound, like a secret unspoken once again, but never truly forgotten above. The Nixian wrath held low orbit in complete silence. No weapons powered. No crew hailed him. And for the first time, Harley Lorren wondered not whether they still trusted him, but whether they still recognized him. ADA's voice returned as he reached the beacon zone. Soft, reverent. "Commander, your neural signature has changed. It is more stable than before. But there are data strings in your subconscious that were not implanted by any known system. Shall I isolate them?" "No," he replied without hesitation, eyes fixed on the shrinking ridge. "They're not meant to be removed." Moments later, the ardent resolve retrieved him, docking with quiet grace beside the Wrath, whose systems remained dimmed voluntarily. Thorn's ship no longer hid because it no longer had to. Whatever judgment had been passed, the Wrath had been seen and not erased. And that, in this galaxy, was a rare kind of mercy. Back aboard his ship, Lorren removed his helmet. His face was older now, not by years, but by memory. A man who had looked at the abyss and, for once, had it look back without blinking. He turned to the main console. "ADA, Compile all unencrypted fragments of the artifact interface. I want them stored in cold memory. Level 0 containment. Nothing sent to command. There was a long pause before 8A responded. Commander, I believe. They already know. He turned slowly. The console screen flickered, and for a single second, a single heartbeat. The symbol that had once pulsed in the blue path chamber shimmered across the interface, then disappeared. No log. No code. No residual trace. IDA. He said softly. Did you see? I did, but it is not in the system. Lorren stared, unmoving. He knew what that meant. Someone or something was still listening. He leaned forward and gave a final command. Set course for the Terran periphery. No signal beacon. No identification. We're going off-grid. ADA hesitated. Commander, are you initiating black? Directive protocol? No. I'm preparing for what comes next. From orbit, the Wrath remained. Watching. Waiting. Maybe resting. Maybe not. And far beyond them, past the rim of Veric, stars flickered in abnormal patterns. Too regular. Too cold. As if the galaxy had noticed humanity's decision and was no longer certain what it would do next in the data logs. Lorren quietly opened one final encrypted file. No coordinates. No timestamps, just a line of text. The second site is already opening. And beneath it, in a language not yet known, a countdown had begun. Days, hours, minutes,